Hey kids, come on up close and you can join me for this children's message as we celebrate the day of Pentecost. You know, Pentecost is the day that the Holy Spirit was poured out on all the disciples and all the followers of Jesus so that they could share the good news of Jesus of Jesus' life, his death, and his resurrection with all the world. That means that Pentecost is the birthday of the church. So let's have a party. What do you say? We're going to have a party. We better have some fun. How about this? Okay, ready? 1, 2, 3. Whoa! That was kind of crazy. I got confetti all over me. Wow. And we're going to have some fun cleaning that up later too. But what's a birthday if you don't get to clean up afterwards? You know, speaking of that, what's a birthday without cake? Cake has to be, I love cake, and birthday cake is a tradition that I hope never goes away. But I'll tell you what, it's really hard for me to share a piece of cake with you since I'm here and you're there, and we can see each other through the TV here, but it isn't quite the same. I can't pass you a piece of cake through the television, but I've got an idea. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to post. We're posting with this children's message as a separate piece. And that'll be available just a little bit later this afternoon. It'll be available by noon today on the YouTube channel. And it'll come up with a link to a cake that you can make using ingredients that we're going to talk about in just a bit. And they're pretty simple ingredients. There's only 8 ingredients to make a simple cake. And so so look for that this afternoon, or look for it later this week, and maybe you can find time to make a cake with your parent or grandparent or somebody in your house so that you can share it together, or maybe even bring it to a neighbor or a friend. As you'll soon find out, the ingredients that make a great cake also can teach us a lot about what makes a great church, too. So, let's see what's in we got all our ingredients here in our birthday gift. So, it starts off with flour. You have to have flour in order to make a cake. If you don't have flour, you're not making a cake. So the number one ingredient, it has the most of any ingredient, and it's the thing that really makes a cake. It's flour. And when you say that the most important ingredient in a cake is flour, the most important ingredient in the church is Jesus. Jesus is the center. Jesus is the thing that makes us the church. Jesus is what makes the whole thing work. Without Jesus, you're not talking about a church. You might be talking about a group of people. It might be great things that are happening there, but it isn't a church if it isn't about Jesus. So our flour is going to represent Jesus today. Now, the next 2 ingredients that you add to your cake, you're going to add right to the flour right away so that they can help keep the flour doing what it's supposed to do and tasting like it's supposed to taste and looking like it's supposed to look. Those ingredients are baking powder and salt. So we've got baking powder and salt. Now, baking powder keeps things light, and it also helps them to lift up, to raise up, so that your cake's not falling flat, but it's being lifted up. Kind of sounds like hope to me. The church is a place of hope, a place where where we don't fall into despair. We don't get too down in the dumps about anything, because we know that when Jesus is doing what Jesus does, hope is never far away. And it always lifts us up so that we don't have to get down or discouraged. We can know that no matter what, we have hope, and we can keep looking up. And knowing that God is going to be there for us. Salt does a similar thing. Salt actually is there not to make your cake taste salty. No, that's not, we don't really want a salty cake, but we have to use salt in our cake. We add it to the flour to preserve its flavor, to make it taste the way that it's supposed to taste. It also preserves the color. So salt gets added so that that color and taste are preserved as all the other ingredients are added to the mix. Salt reminds me of another thing we need in the church, and that's truth. We can add all kinds of things to the mix, but we have to do it in a way that keeps the truth of Jesus as the center focus. If it starts to take away from that truth, we don't want anything to get in the way of that truth being the centerpiece, the truth of Jesus being the centerpiece of all we do. And the thing that helps us to do that in a cake is just a pinch of salt. Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth." You can help people preserve the truth of Christ in all that you do as well. And we need that in the church. Well, so after you've got your flour, your baking powder, and your salt all mixed together, you're going to want to add, some of this lovely stuff. You know what that is. It's butter. You're going to want to add butter to your cake. Butter is going to add moisture, it's going to add flavor, and it's going to help your cake to rise up and to stand tall. And that makes me think about character. Character is important. The things that make us unique, our unique qualities and abilities, they are not the same between person to person or congregation to congregation. Throughout the whole church, we all have different character, different qualities, different abilities, different things about us that add flavor to our cake. Butter represents that in our cake, but you represent that in our church. And we want those flavors to come out and to be mixed in with Jesus, with the truth and the hope that we share. Then our church, then you can really stand up in the world and not just blend in like everything else. You will stand out and you will be who you were meant to be. And that's really an important aspect of the church too. After we've added some butter, the next thing that we're going to add is, I bet you guessed it, all right? Right? So the next thing that we're going to add is some sugar. Now, we're not going to hold a whole bag of sugar, but so follow the recipe for that. But everyone knows that sugar makes things sweet, but it also adds texture to your cake. It's what gives your cake that fluffy on the inside, light and fluffy on the inside, and that nice little crustiness right around the outside, so that your cake is going to be exactly the way that you want it to be. I think about sugar like joy. It adds sweetness to life, and it keeps us soft on the inside, and it protects us on the outside. Sugar is important to a cake, but joy is essential for life, and our joy comes from what the Spirit gives us. It comes from what God pours into our life, so that we can always remain soft and loving on the inside and protected from the outside, so that our joy stays full and complete. Well, we're getting pretty close. By now your cake batter should probably look a little bit like crumbly sand. But we're going to need something that's going to hold it all together, that's going to keep things from falling apart. And that means we're going to need to add a couple of eggs. Well, eggs are the strength of your cake, and strength is needed in the church. Our strength comes from our faith, our trust. It doesn't come from how strong I am, but it comes from how much I am willing to trust Jesus to hold all this life together, to be the one that keeps us united and standing strong in the midst of everything that is going on. When strength is added to our church, things just don't fall apart. And that's essential for us to live together as God's people, as the church. Well, we're down to just 2 more ingredients. And the next one is a big one in my bag. Ooh. The next one is some milk. Milk adds a little bit of color. I know it's white, but it adds a little bit of color, and it adds some flavor also to our mix. And it does that while keeping the cake really, really nice and moist. I think of the milk in our church as purity. It keeps us from getting, it brings us back to that look and feel of the Lord who is pure love. It brings us back to that whiteness we knew in Jesus, that purity we saw in him. It comes back because we've added this purity, this milk, and we've kept things from looking too different than what they really are supposed to be. And it helps add a little flavor to that as well. Well, the last ingredient, speaking of flavor, in our cake is some vanilla extract. And so vanilla extract, we're just going to add a little bit, but it's going to enhance the flavor of every other ingredient in our cake. It's going to make the whole thing taste better. When I think about that in terms of the church, what I think about is grace. Grace gets added, not to change what's there, but to make everything that is there just a little bit better. That's what it takes to make up a cake. And now you can also see what makes for a good church. Built around Jesus, filled with hope and truth and character and joy, held together with the strength of the Spirit and the love for one another, and to show true representation of Christ to the world, made all the better by the grace with which we live. Happy birthday, church, and don't forget to share your cake.